This is Parker, yet again, with more video game talk. Today I'm going to talk about generational transitions in the video game industry. Though hindsight is pretty easy to see why Nintendo had problems with transitions in the past. Like, for instance, the N64 suffered from the console manufacturer with the letter S as its initial. And I'm not talking about Sega, but that company with the letter S having a master class of developer relations, developer environment, and medium. Coming off the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, it was easy for someone to whisper sweet words to make the developers leave Nintendo. And the PS1 was the start of a easier developer environment for companies to work with. It finally gave them 700 megabyte mediums. N64 withered the storm of developer relations, and it also weathered the storm of developer environment. But when you have only 32 megabytes to work with compared to 700 megabytes, it's a no-brainer. And Nintendo lost one of their biggest third-party partners, Square Enix, with a very infamous ad campaign that went along with it. Also, the GameCube, in comparison, didn't have too many setbacks. It didn't really have those problems like the N64 did. Good developer relations, good developer environment was key for the GameCube, which it had. But they also suffered on the medium front once again. Going with the 1.8 gigabyte mini disc was a weird decision. But it wasn't incredibly poor. Using DVDs would have absolutely helped the GameCube. But look at the Xbox. GameCube was one of the strongest video game systems in that generation. But, and listen carefully, this might have been the generation that convinced Nintendo that it wasn't worth fighting on equal grounds with the competition when it comes to power. Power isn't going to get you ahead. Moving on to the Wii. The Wii was, well, it was the Wii. And it doesn't really belong in this conversation, but it did shift things in a way that Nintendo still hasn't really fully recovered from. And I'm talking about developer relationships. Now let's move on to the Wii U. The Wii U was a mess. 6 ways from Sunday. It had bad development environment and ideas about the Nintendo audience that was reinforced by the Wii success. It also had bad marketing with no standout, legendary, going down in history Zelda games, which is very important for a Nintendo console. It had problems out the wazoo. Also, high cost of R&D because of the gamepad, which was a really good idea, but it was just too costly. And the systems, MCM, made the console overpriced for what it offered. Now, in the video game history, other companies also had very bad transitions from one generation to the next. I'm going to focus on the competition now. The Xbox brand. From the 360 to the Xbox One. This faltered for some of the same reasons that the Wii U faltered. The Xbox One had heavy focus on gimmicks that people did not want. The main one, TV. Something that they tried to shove down the people's throat, and the people did not want that. It hurt the Xbox One more than it being a weak console, which it was. And then there was the news of bad, trifling, horrible, disgusting customer practices that Microsoft could not walk back fast enough to save its life. And then bundling the Kinect inside of the box was a very expensive R&D piece that inflated the price sky high. Also, moving on from the Xbox One to the Xbox Series, early in this generation, even though it's still early, right? One of the prevailing issues for this Xbox Series brand is, where are the games? The Xbox Series is suffering. It's withering away on the vine because it does not have strong first-party support. In fact, the first-party support for the system is non-extinct. This is bad. This is real bad. And now we move on to the company that I really don't like. I'll never like them. It's the company from the manufacturer that begins with the letter S. And I'm not talking about Sega. From the PS2 to the PS3. So the PS2 development environment was more difficult than its direct competitors. But it was a runaway success and close enough in performance to the competition. that the third parties did not have a problem making the PS2 its default system. But the PS3 was in a much worse development environment. And I do mean much worse than both its competitors. Because it had a very ridiculous, expensive R&D cell processor. And the Blu-ray drive really put customers off because the price tag went through the roof. It was one of the most expensive video game consoles in the industry history. All of this, and I do believe all of this most likely will make the transition from the Nintendo Switch to their successor very easy for Nintendo, because they have a wealth of history that they can learn from when it comes to transitions. But they have to keep it simple. They have to keep it simple. You see, with the 360, we entered an era where one size fit all development suites. With Nintendo partnering with Nvidia, they got a very easy to develop for system in the Nintendo Switch. And that will only continue with their successor. They don't need any expensive gimmicks. One of the benefits of going from the Switch form factor is its flexibility. Having a default controller layout in the box allows gimmicks to be freed up as add-ons. The small form factor also means they can't shove too many crazy ideas into the body of the console. Just don't pull a Kinect or a gamepad. Also, games, which to no one's surprise sell systems. Just look at the greatest system seller of all time, The Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, as proof that games sell consoles. The medium is going to be a growing problem, unfortunately, as it's expensive even for 32 gigabyte cards. But there are ways around that, like mandatory downloads and whatnot. Maybe allow for installs to internal or external storage. I think it's Nintendo's fight to lose because they're on top. They're the winners of the generation. As long as they don't go cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs with trying to fish in the blue ocean so heavily again, or some expensive way to play. It's going to be hard for them to not follow up. Nearly all of the successful console successors built off of what came before. Sure, they didn't get as high as the Hail Marys of the Wii and Nintendo DS, but you don't need to do that all the time. This is all I have for now. Until next time, Nintendo fans, keep playing Nintendo first-party games only.